My phone was buzzing with a message. I was lying on the couch, mindlessly flipping through social media, when I saw something in the family chat that made my blood run cold. It was a photo that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. At first, I didn't understand what exactly I was looking at. A blurry, darkened image. But when I looked closer, my insides turned to ice. On the screen was a racy selfie of my wife Sarah, with another man, in our bedroom. He was standing behind her, half naked, smiling at the camera like he owned the place. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. A second later, the photo disappeared. She deleted it, but the damage was done. The phone vibrated again almost immediately. Sarah, honey, don't pay attention. It's a glitch. I wanted to send another photo. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen as the world I had built over 15 years of marriage crumbled to pieces. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. That's when I received a call from an unknown number. Is this Mr. James Cooper? Sarah Cooper's husband. Yes. My voice sounded strange, distant. This is St. John's Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. She's in serious condition. I hung up without another word, grabbed my keys, and headed for the hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. I should have been devastated about the accident, but all I could think about was that photo. Who was that man? How long had this been going on? The questions burned in my mind as I drove through the rain-slicked streets. The emergency room was chaos when I arrived. A nurse directed me to the waiting area, saying Sarah was in surgery. I sat there, numb, as memories of our life together played through my mind like some cruel slideshow. I met Sarah when we were both 28. She was a legal secretary with dreams of starting her own business. I was a software developer who just landed my first major contract. We clicked immediately. Same sense of humor, same values, same dreams of building something meaningful together. Or so I thought. The marriage had been good, at least from my perspective. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never imagined this. We had 2 teenagers now, Emma, 15, and Marcus, 13. What would this do to them? My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Sarah's best friend, Lisa. James, I just heard about the accident. Is she okay? Do you need anything? I stared at the message, wondering if Lisa knew. Had Sarah confided in her? Was everyone in on this except me? The thought made me feel sick. Instead of responding, I opened our shared cloud storage. The deleted photo might still be there. Sarah wasn't particularly tech-savvy. My hands were trembling as I navigated through the folders. And there it was in all its horrible glory. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days ago, when Sarah said she was working late on a big case. The man in the photo looked familiar. I zoomed in and suddenly it hit me. David Richardson, one of the partners at her law firm. Respected family man, active in the community, father of 3. The perfect citizen. I'd met him at company parties, shaken his hand, laughed at his jokes. All while he was. A doctor appeared in the waiting room. Mr. Cooper. I stood up, shoving the phone in my pocket. Yes. Your wife is out of surgery. She has a concussion, several broken ribs, and a broken arm, but she's stable. The airbag saved her life. She was very lucky. Lucky. Right. Can I see her? The doctor nodded. She's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but you can sit with her. Room 412. I followed him through the sterile corridors, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to confront her the moment she opened her eyes. Another part wanted to pretend I'd never seen the photo, to go back to my comfortable illusion of a happy marriage. But I knew I couldn't do that. This wasn't just about the photo, it was about years of lies. How many late nights at the office had really been spent with him? How many work conferences were actually romantic getaways? Every memory was now tainted with doubt. Sarah looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets. A bandage wrapped around her head, and her left arm was in a cast. The steady beeping of monitors filled the room. I sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. Dad, Is Mom okay? Marcus and I are worried. Should we come to the hospital? I texted back quickly. She's out of surgery, sleeping now. Stay at Aunt Jenny's for tonight. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Jenny was my sister who lived nearby. The kids had been at her house when the accident happened. A small mercy. They didn't need to see their father falling apart. As I sat there, I started going through Sarah's social media accounts. Everything looked normal on the surface: family photos, work events, inspirational quotes. But now I noticed the patterns. David appeared in many of the office photos, always standing a bit too close to Sarah. There were comments from him on almost every post, seemingly innocent but loaded with hidden meaning now that I knew the truth. I opened Google Maps and checked Sarah's location history. Another thing she probably didn't realize I had access to. The pattern was clear. Regular visits to an apartment building across town. Always on those late work nights. I looked up the address. Of course, it was registered to David Richardson. Hours passed. I sat there in that uncomfortable chair, piecing together the extent of their deception. The expensive jewelry I'd never seen her wear. The credit card charges at hotels on days she was supposedly at conferences. The hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. It had all been there, right in front of me, but I'd been too trusting to see it. Around midnight, Sarah started to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. James? Her voice was barely a whisper. What happened? I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. You were in a car accident. You're at St. John's. The car I was driving to. She trailed off, wincing in pain. To where, Sarah? David's apartment. Her eyes widened slightly, the tiniest tell, but I caught it. Then she tried to compose herself. What are you talking about? I was going to Lisa's. Don't. My voice was quiet but firm. I saw the photo you accidentally posted in the family chat. She closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. James, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you were taking intimate photos with David Richardson in our bedroom? Can you explain the hotel charges, the late nights, the secret apartment visits? You've been spying on me? A hint of indignation crept into her voice. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Spying? You sent the evidence to our entire family yourself. The rest wasn't hard to find once I started looking. How long, Sarah? She turned her head away, staring at the wall. I don't want to talk about this now. I'm in pain. I'm confused. Fine. I stood up. But we will talk about it. And not just us. There are other people who deserve to know the truth. Her head snapped back toward me. What do you mean? Well, for starters, I think Mrs. Richardson might be interested in how her husband spends his evenings. You can't. Real panic in her voice now. James, please. You'll destroy his family, his career. I'll destroy his family? That's rich, Sarah. What about our family? What about Emma and Marcus? Did you think about them during all those secret meetings? She started to cry in earnest now. The kids. Please don't tell them. They'll hate me. They're teenagers, not idiots. They're gonna find out one way or another. The question is whether they hear it from us or from the family chat where their mother posts racy photos with her lover. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Is everything okay in here? Mrs. Cooper's heart rate is elevated. Everything's fine, I said, standing up. I was just leaving. James, wait, Sarah called after me. We need to talk about this. I turned back at the door. Yes, we do. And we will. But first, I think it's time for a little game. A game? She looked confused, afraid. What are you talking about? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Truth or dare, Sarah. Remember how we used to play that when we first started dating? You always chose truth because you said you had nothing to hide. I wonder what you'd choose now. I left her there, crying in her hospital bed. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I pulled out my phone and started making calls. It was time for everyone to learn the truth about Sarah Cooper and David Richardson. But first, I needed help. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Mike Dawson, private investigator and an old friend from college. If there was more evidence of their affair, and I was sure there was, he would find it. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Mike? It's James Cooper. I need your help with something sensitive. James? It's midnight, man. What's going on? My wife is having an affair with her boss. I need proof, everything you can find. And I need it fast. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure about this? Once you start digging. I'm sure. She accidentally posted a compromising photo in our family chat. I've already found some evidence on my own, but I need more. I need to know everything. Okay, Mike said slowly. But James, be careful. People do crazy things when their secrets are exposed. I know. That's counting on. I ended the call and started my car. As I pulled out of the hospital parking lot, I was already planning my next move. Sarah and David thought they were so clever, so careful with their secret affair. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Mike worked faster than I expected. By morning, he had compiled enough evidence to make my head spin. I sat in my car outside the hospital, scrolling through his findings on my tablet. Each new revelation felt like another knife in my back. There's more. Mike's voice crackled through my phone speaker. They've been meeting at the Golden Crown Hotel every other Tuesday. I've got security camera footage of them entering together. And James. She's been using your business account to pay for it. I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. The Golden Crown, where we'd spent our 10th anniversary. What about their phones? The text messages are, well, you should see for yourself. I've sent everything to your email. But listen, are you sure you want to do this so publicly? Could get messy. I watched as a group of people entered the hospital. Sarah's parents, Robert and Marie Anderson. They'd always treated me like a son. Behind them came David Richardson's wife, Catherine, elegant even in her obvious distress. I called her last night after leaving the hospital. She deserved to know. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Mike. Thanks for everything. I grabbed the small projector from my back seat and headed inside. Everything was prepared. The conference room next to Sarah's private room was ready. The nurses had been surprisingly understanding when I'd explained the situation. Maybe they'd seen this kind of drama before. Sarah was awake when I entered her room, looking better than yesterday. The fear in her eyes when she saw me almost made me waver. Almost. James, she whispered. I've been thinking about what you said. Good morning, Sarah. I kept my voice gentle, almost loving. How are you feeling? She looked confused by my tone. Better. The doctor says I can probably go home tomorrow. That's wonderful news. You know, it's amazing how many people care about you. They've all been so worried. On cue, her parents entered the room. Marie rushed to her bedside. Oh, Sarah. We were so frightened when James called. Robert hung back, watching me with a strange expression. I wondered if he'd seen the photo in the family chat before Sarah deleted it. Mom? Dad? Sarah looked between them and me. You didn't have to come. Of course we did, honey, Marie said. And we're not the only ones. Catherine Richardson appeared in the doorway, and Sarah's face went pale. What is she doing here? Mrs. Richardson was very concerned when she heard about your accident, I said smoothly, especially given how closely you work with her husband. Sarah's hands clutched at her blanket. I don't understand what's happening. Don't you? Catherine's voice was ice. I think you understand perfectly, Sarah. The door opened again. David Richardson stepped in, followed by my sister Jenny with Emma and Marcus. David froze when he saw his wife. Catherine? What are you doing here? Funny. That's exactly what your mistress just asked. The room went silent. Emma and Marcus looked bewildered. Marie's hand flew to her mouth. I think, I said into the silence, we should move this to the conference room next door. There's something everyone needs to see. James, please, Sarah begged. I'm not well enough. The doctor says you're fine to sit in a wheelchair for an hour. Nurse Collins is already bringing one. Sure enough, the nurse appeared with a wheelchair. Despite Sarah's protests, she was soon seated in it, a blanket over her legs. I wheeled her into the conference room myself, ever the attentive husband. The projector was set up, the screen pulled down. Everyone took seats, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah sat in her wheelchair at the front, trapped. "I want to tell you all a story," I began, standing at the podium. "It's about trust, and betrayal, and the lies we tell ourselves." I clicked the remote. The first image appeared: Sarah and David entering the Golden Crown Hotel, timestamped 2 weeks ago. This is how it started for me. One photo, then another, then another. Click. Sarah at a restaurant I'd never seen. David's hand on hers across the table. Click. Bank statements showing hotel charges, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases. But the really interesting part, I continued, is what I found in the cloud storage. Sarah's messages appeared on screen. "I want to be with you so much. This idiot doesn't suspect anything. David, soon, baby. Once the merger goes through, we'll have everything we need. Sarah. I can't wait to start our new life together. James is so blind. He actually bought that story about working late on the Johnson case." Emma stood up suddenly. "Mom, what is this?" Sarah reached for her daughter. "Emma. Sweetie, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" Catherine cut in. "Because it looks like you've been sleeping with my husband. In fact," she pulled out her phone, "I have some interesting messages of my own to share." David finally found his voice. "Catherine, wait. Oh, now you want to talk? After months of lies? After spending our anniversary at a hotel with her?" Marcus was crying silently. Jenny put an arm around him, glaring at Sarah. "Sarah." Robert's voice was barely controlled. "Please tell me this isn't true." I clicked to the next slide. The infamous bedroom selfie that had started it all. Marie gasped. Robert turned away. Emma ran from the room, Marcus right behind her. "I should go after them," Jenny said, standing.
No, Irraplia.
"Let them process this. We're not done here." "James," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Stop this. Please. Stop." "But we haven't even gotten to the best part yet." I turned to David. "Should we tell them about the merger? About how you two plan to take control of the firm, force out the other partners? About the offshore account you've been funneling money into?" David went white. Catherine's head snapped toward him. "What offshore account?" I smiled. "Mike is very thorough. He found everything. Every email, every transaction, every little scheme you two cooked up." "You can't prove any of that," David said, but his voice shook. "Actually, I can. And so can the SEC. I sent them quite an interesting package this morning." The room erupted in chaos. Catherine launched into a tirade at David. Marie was sobbing. Robert stood silently, looking at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. Through it all, I watched Sarah. She sat in her wheelchair, defeated, as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. "I have one more thing to share," I said, raising my voice above the din. Everyone fell silent again. The next image appeared on screen, a pregnancy test. Positive. Found in Sarah's desk drawer at work, dated 1 week ago. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. David staggered back a step. "Interesting timing," I said conversationally, "considering I had a vasectomy 3 months ago." Catherine stood up so fast her chair fell over. Without a word, she slapped David across the face and walked out. He ran after her, calling her name. "Mom!" Marcus had returned, standing in the doorway. Are you pregnant?" Sarah couldn't speak. She just sat there, tears falling. I think," I said gently, "it's time for everyone to go home and process this. Sarah needs her rest, after all." As people filed out, I knelt beside Sarah's wheelchair. "Truth or dare?" "Sarah? You never did answer me." She looked at me through her tears. "Why did you do this? Why like this?" "Because you needed to understand exactly what you're losing. The house I bought you last month? It's in my name only. The business you wanted to start? The paperwork was never filed. The future you planned with David? Well, I don't think that's going to work out now. I loved you once, she whispered. No, I replied, standing up. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. I wheeled her back to her room, helped her into bed, and turned to leave. James? Her voice was small, broken. What happens now? I paused at the door. Now? Now you get to experience what it feels like to lose everything you care about. To have your whole world pulled out from under you. To realize that every plan you made, every dream you had, was built on lies. The children will know exactly who their mother is. No more pretending. No more lies. Please. I'll do anything. I turned back one last time. That's the problem, Sarah. You already did. As I walked out of the hospital, my phone buzzed with a message from Mike. SEC is very interested in those financial records. They're opening a formal investigation. The room fell silent after the revelation about the pregnancy test. Sarah sat trembling in her wheelchair while David stood frozen by the door. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Before everyone leaves, I said calmly, there's something else you need to see. I pulled out my phone and connected it to a larger screen I had set up earlier. Sarah, remember when you said you were working late at the office last month? Sarah's face went pale. She knew what was coming. I found something interesting when I checked your location history. The screen showed a Google Maps timeline. Your phone tells quite a story, Sarah. Like how it spent 3 hours at David's private apartment when you told me you were having dinner with Lisa. That doesn't prove anything, Sarah stammered. Phone tracking isn't accurate. You're right, I agreed, clicking to the next slide. That's why I have the security footage from his building's lobby. The video played silently. Sarah entering the building. David greeting her with a kiss. The timestamp matched exactly. Marie, Sarah's mother, let out a choked sob. Oh, Sarah, how could you? There's more. I started laying out bank statements on the table. Premium suite at the Golden Crown Hotel. Weekly dinner dates at Alessandro's. A Cartier bracelet worth $3,000. I turned to Catherine, David's wife. Have you ever seen your husband wear a platinum watch with a special engraving? Catherine's hands clenched into fists. Show me. I handed her a photo. The watch's engraving read, Forever yours, my heart and soul S. The same day, I continued, that Sarah told me she couldn't help with her mother's medical bills because money was tight. Robert, Sarah's father, who had been silent until now, exploded. We had to remortgage our house for those bills. Dad, please. Sarah reached for him, but he stepped away. And here's where it gets really interesting. I projected a series of emails onto the screen. They weren't just having an affair. They had a plan. The emails detailed everything. How they would use my money to start Sarah's dream boutique, transfer ownership through shell companies, then use it to launder funds from the law firm's client accounts. David had been embezzling for months, hiding the money in offshore accounts. Your secretary was very helpful, David, I said. Once I showed her the evidence of fraud, she gave me everything. The SEC is very interested in those records. David lunged forward. You son of a... Dad, stop. Emma's voice cut through the chaos. My 15-year-old daughter stood up, tears streaming down her face. Is it true, Mom? Did you really steal from Grandma and Grandpa? Sarah couldn't meet her eyes. Marcus, my 13-year-old son, moved closer to his sister, both of them backing away from their mother. But wait, I said softly. There's one more thing. I turned to Sarah. Show them the tattoo. The room went deadly quiet. Sarah clutched her hospital gown tighter. No. I smiled without humor. David, why don't you show yours first? Catherine's head snapped toward her husband. What tattoo? With trembling fingers, David unbuttoned his shirt. There, over his heart, was an elegant S with a date. Their first secret rendezvous. Your turn, Sarah. Slowly, reluctantly, Sarah pulled back her gown just enough to reveal the matching D on her chest. You got their initials tattooed on each other? Catherine's laugh was bitter. On our anniversary, David? It's not, David started, but Catherine cut him off. Not what? Not what it looks like. Because it looks like you branded yourself with your mistress's initial, while I was at home, planning our second honeymoon. I pulled out 2 envelopes. Speaking of marriage, Catherine, these are for you. My lawyer drew up divorce papers for both couples. Everything's documented, including the fraud. Catherine snatched her envelope and threw it at David. Sign them, now. And these, I placed the second envelope in front of Sarah, are yours. I've been generous with the settlement, considering the circumstances. More than you deserve. James, Sarah's voice cracked. The children will stay with me, I finished. The judge will be very interested in your moral character. Not to mention the federal fraud charges you'll both be facing. I wouldn't live with you anyway, Emma said, her voice hard. You're not the mom I thought I knew. Marcus nodded, tears falling. How could you do this to us? Sarah reached for them, but they backed away. Marie tried to comfort her daughter, but Sarah flinched from her touch. The house on Lakeview Drive, I said quietly. The one you've been dreaming about for years? I bought it last month. It was going to be your anniversary surprise. I placed the purchase agreement on the table. It's in my name only, of course. Just like the business loan for your boutique. Sarah's sob echoed through the room. Everything she'd wanted, everything she'd schemed for, crumbling to dust. The SEC will be here tomorrow, I announced. They're particularly interested in those offshore accounts. And Catherine's lawyer would like to discuss a joint lawsuit against the firm. David staggered back, his carefully constructed world collapsing. I'll give you all a moment to process, I said, gathering my things. Emma, Marcus, let's go home. James, Sarah called as we reached the door. Please, I'll do anything. I turned back one last time. That's the problem, Sarah. You already did. You threw away 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and a family that loved you. For what? A cheap affair and embezzled money? I loved you once, she whispered.
No, irraplia.
You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. As we walked out, I could hear Sarah's sobs mixing with Catherine's angry voice and David's weak protests. My phone buzzed. The SEC investigators were moving up their meeting. Everything was falling into place. In the parking lot, Emma suddenly hugged me tight. Dad, are we going to be okay? I held both my children close, feeling their pain, their confusion, their strength. Yes, I promised. We're going to be just fine. Sarah and David had played their game of secrets and lies, thinking they were invincible. Instead, they'd lost everything: their marriages, their children, their careers, their freedom. As I drove my children home, I thought about the truth Sarah had never understood. Real love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give up for them.